Hello, everyone. This is the Hockey Outsiders, episode number 15. It's kind of a milestone hitting episode 15, I guess, of sorts. It is November 23rd, 2017. Here, as always, with Shane. How's it going, Shane?
Going great. Can't wait to talk. Yeah, milestone 15. I've never heard the 15 milestone before, but I'll take it.
I think they do it for marriages, though, don't they? They have 15.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not there yet. I don't know about that
Take
stuff.
it anyway. 15 for me is pretty decent. I didn't think we'd get this far, to be very honest. So, pretty pleased with having this many at least under our belts. So, few things that I want to talk about today. A few things that are actually quite interesting going on in the NHL here right now. Let's start with teams that are struggling, I guess, because that's where kind of my heart's sitting right now with the Oilers playing like hot garbage. Um, let's talk about what you think they should do or what you think the problem is. Let's kind of go in that direction first and see if there's any sort of realistic fixes that we can come up with out there.
Okay, I'll put my 2 cents in quick because I think you're going to have a lot more to say on Edmonton. But I think I was looking at the roster. There's not enough depth on that team. I don't think. I initially looking at the roster at the beginning of the year, I thought it was a roster that was deep enough to do well because the same view I have about Pittsburgh with Crosby that you put Crosby in there and two lines get better right away. Then your defense get better right away. Everything gets better. But the thing I thought about today is that the minors system in Pittsburgh is constantly pumping out these guys like Gensel and Matt Murray and all these very useful young hockey players that you can just plug and play and they can keep up and they're great. Edmonton has not really been able to do that. And some of these young guys are like Puljujarvi, who you'd love for him to be able to come in and be producing at this point, but he's not ready. He's just not ready. And he's not ready in the AHL. So not having those guys to be able to rotate into the roster and get young legs, I think their system's a bit weak, and I think it's biting them in the butt right now.
I think I agree with you to a point, and I'm going to say this again. This is every time I hear this argument about like teams like New Jersey, for example, who say, "Oh well," like I'm quite surprised at the turnaround that New Jersey has put in, and this is a team that's a prime example of having sort of depth in your system. They have went from a team that I think most people predicted to be one of the worst ones in the NHL last year to being one of the best ones so far this season, and it's not due to just one guy. They've got three or four guys that have sort of come out of nowhere and really played extremely well for them. I mean, if you look at the guys that they've brought in, they weren't on anybody's radar. I mean, you can't tell me that people were like, "Oh yeah, watch out for Will Butcher" or "Watch out for Bratt
Yeah,
up front."
Brad. Yeah.
Were even on anybody's radar. They were all. We talk about fantasy a lot. Like I mean, all of these guys that came in for Jersey have been waiver wire pickups, and it doesn't matter how deep the league you're in is. Every one of those guys were waiver wire pickups, even in the deepest of leagues. So that tells you something about having sort of a depth system that works. New Jersey's a prime example of that this year. Edmonton, you're right, it just isn't there. I mean, they've got a couple of young guys that are really looking good in Puljujarvi and Yamamoto, but they're just not ready yet. But we should have more. So I think you're completely right, and you're not off base on this one.
I think the other thing, and I'm sure you'll agree about this as well, and on paper they looked all right because they did well last year. In the playoffs, had a nice run in the playoffs. But the defense was an issue at the beginning of last year. Everybody was talking about, well, they still need a defenseman, obviously. Obviously, we need to add a defenseman. They never really added a defenseman. Well, they did. They added Sekaras, who was way unsung about how good he was. And I think what you're seeing, a lot like Markov being gone in Montreal and the struggles they had at the beginning of the year to fill that spot, nobody's been able to fill Sekaras's spot. If you talk to like hockey guys about him, he's not like he's a good player, but he's not an amazing player, but he's solid.
Well,
He's just a solid player.
he's not really touted as a number one defenseman. He has never really been touted, I don't think, as a number one defenseman. He's always maybe a good number two or a decent number two, but he was never a really top pairing guy. But in Edmonton, you can actually see how valuable he is, which is a little sort of worrisome.
Yeah, that's true as well.
We're supposed to have guys that have come in. Like, I mean, Nurse has played pretty well this year, but I mean, it just hasn't been enough. Klefbom, if anything, has taken a giant step backwards, which is surprising for me. It's a frustrating time, and I understand. Like, I mean, you're inside the Oilers fan group that we're in there, and you probably see a lot of the kind of stuff that goes on in there, and how negative it gets. But it's sort of one of those things where I understand the negativity. I understand why, because they just came off this, 10 years of just horrible, probably the worst stretch in Oiler history of hockey, right? And now they come in and they had such a great year last year, and then now they're kind of back to those same sort of, slot.
Like your girlfriend cheats on you, and you finally take her back. You're finally like, all right, I finally believe you. It's hard to fully commit. It's hard to fully be like, I really believe you. Like, people are ready to jump off the boat as soon as this starts floundering again. People want to be the first one to be like, I told you, they're not quite back yet. They're not quite as good as everybody thinks.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's a tough.
Don't go all in.
Because again, I understand. Like I said, I'm still not that concerned as of yet. I mean, they're only 5 points out of a playoff spot at this point in time, and I think that's very much attainable. But if it keeps going for any sort of stretch of time longer, where they don't really put a bunch of wins together, it could end up being a really, really, really not good situation.
Yeah, and I mean, it is. People are asking like, "Oh, this is nothing. They're going to totally turn it around." There's not really a problem. You got one side saying there's not really a problem. I'll get over it. It's the early season. It's all going to turn around. And then you got the other side saying everything's wrong. It's somewhere in the middle, but there are problems. And I think maybe it's good for Edmonton that some of these problems are coming to light now, not in the playoffs. And I still think they're going to make the playoffs. Like, I was all over them at the beginning of the year, thinking how great they were going to be. I still think they're going to make the playoffs. And maybe this, like, panic to get a defenseman or to add I don't know, depth forward or something might
this rumor circulating right now is that Chiarelli was at the Columbus game the other night. Was it Columbus and Buffalo, I think it was? And there's talk that they're looking at a couple of defensemen from Columbus, possibly a guy like David Savard, or they have this young kid that's supposed to be quite good as well that they might be looking at. But that's kind of pointing to maybe Nugent Hopkins being the guy that's sort of been moved out. So,
and that's interesting too, because I still think he's a good hockey player too. I like him as a hockey player. I think he's
played extremely well this year, right? I mean, he's second on the team in scoring at this point in time, if I'm not mistaken. So
I mean, is it Nutavara that they're thinking about getting?
I can't remember his name. Let me take a look and see if I can find it on here.
Gabriel Carlson.
I think
anyway.
I think it's Carlson is the name that came up. A defenseman. He's supposed to. He made the team, I guess, but they sent him back because they don't have enough room for him. But he's supposed to be a really good puck mover.
Okay. I mean, it's very fixable, but it's not as well, because they needed a defenseman at the start of last year, and everybody knew it. And they never got it. They got Sekaras, but Sekaras was a free agent. Like, he was available, Maybe they need to do something like that. Maybe they need to go looking for a free agent that's out there. I don't know who's left among defensive free agents, but they need something.
There's a couple of different avenues that I think they should maybe try to search. And I think, and I mentioned this one on the last podcast, I still think that their upfront depth is really lacking. I think that they should maybe give the Rangers a phone call and see if they could if they would be willing to ship us Nash and Grabner. I mean, they've been trying to get rid of that Nash contract for quite a while, and I think that the Rangers would probably entertain that. I mean, it is the last year, but at the same time, they would like to have that extra cap so they can actually go out and get a few people as well. But the problem with the Rangers is I'm not sure if they're 100% set on embracing a rebuild or embracing that their time is sort of up.
Yeah, I agree. So it's going to be hard. Nobody wants to give up defensemen. Even like Colorado, when they were at the bottom, they wouldn't trade some of their defensemen. So teams are aware. Like, I know I always mention this, but I play in that really deep fantasy league that is like just like the NHL. You really have a roster just like the NHL. And what you notice when the rosters get that deep is defensemen suck. There's not a lot of good defensemen, and they're way higher priority in that league. Nobody will trade their defenseman in that league. It's very similar to the NHL. I can predict trends a lot of the time because of that league. Because like for 5 years now, nobody's traded defenseman. Carlson was drafted #1 in that league, and we all laughed at the guy, and then we all begged the guy to trade Carlson to us because we realized how valuable he was. And everybody, when they realized that, they went, okay, I'm not giving up. My 50-point defenseman is gold, absolute gold in that league. And it's similar in the NHL. Guys that get 30 to 45 to 50 points, they do not grow on trees. Like a guy like Werenski coming out last year and being that good is the reason Columbus are that good. It's the difference between Columbus being a non-playoff team that didn't look good at all the year before to, wow, they can play. Look how good they are. They got to the playoffs. They have a chance against Pittsburgh. So it's huge value. If I was an NHL GM right now in the draft we're coming up, all of the defensemen on my board would be bumped up 15 spots. I would not be even looking at forwards unless they were transcendent, like talent guys.
There's a lot of people that are really high on this Dahlin defenseman that's supposed to be the #1 rated for next year's draft. I heard one person actually say that he is as highly touted as Matthews and McDavid are as far as generational talents on the blue line. Do you believe that? Do you buy that?
I'm not sure. I got to spend more time researching them. I don't do my draft prep until closer to the like midpoint of the year. Okay. But a lot of that hype comes true. Like that was the hype around McDavid. That was the hype around. If people start talking in those kind of that kind of verbiage or those kind of adjectives, like transcendent kind of talent, then a lot of the time I go with it. I believe it because the scouts know what they're talking about. They do know what they're talking about. And they don't use that lightly. Like when they were doing about Matthews, some people didn't believe. And look at Matthews now. Matthews is legit and amazing. So if the scouts are saying that, I need to do more research myself, but I do generally believe it.
Okay, so if this sort of trends this as it, let's say that everything goes as it is right now, and Phoenix ends up with the first pick, do they then deal away a guy like Ekman Larsson?
I feel like they should almost. He's not even proving himself to be useful to them at all. Like he's not helping them right now. And I don't know his age. I don't think he's over 30 though.
Nobody's helping him. That team is a disaster.
It's really disappointing. Like I keep feeling like they're making good moves. Like last year, I felt like they added some good players. I thought they made some good changes. I liked them getting Ranta for very little and guys like that. And I like some of their young players. Like in that deep fantasy league, I look at Arizona players just like I look at any other team, and they look good on paper. They look like they should be producing in the NHL. But then a lot like Buffalo, like we've talked about Buffalo, they just get up there and then the team doesn't win. The team just sucks.
Buffalo's been sort of a thorn in my side the last two years in a row because I picked them to kind of be my dark horse there as well. So they're a tough one for me. I really like the way that they've actually built their team. There's a lot of really good players that I like on that team, but boy, oh boy, they just something there is just really killing them. I don't even know what it is.
You know, it's an interesting. So to segue, you're saying how bad Arizona are, which is totally true. They've got the most goals against them in the NHL. Can you guess? Let's see, a little trivia. Guess, without looking, the second most goals against of any team in the NHL. I'll give you 2 guesses. Not easy. I'll give you a little hint too. It's not the team you would expect.
Well, I do know that Pittsburgh's been blown out a few times. I'll probably go with them because they've actually been smashed a few times.
You're right. It's Pittsburgh.
Was it Pittsburgh? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lucky one.
They've only got, I think, 4 or 5 goals less against them than Arizona does, and they're both head and shoulders above other teams. So
they've been hammered around a few times. I do remember that they got smoked 7-1, 8-1, and most of the games that they're actually winning are fairly high scoring. And who would have guessed that at the beginning of the year, right? Because I remember in our league there, one of the guys he's got Murray and Talbot, and he was touting himself as being the guy that was going to run away with it this year. So, boy, oh boy, that's an eye opener for sure.
And they've also just lost Malkin. So there's another team.
Malkin gone.
Yeah.
Malkin
gone. I didn't check how long the injury. I'll check it now. But he's out right now for sure. And already struggling like this, and then losing Malkin. It's not like last year where they were, Malkin gets hurt mid-year, they were already set. Like they had no worries. This year, they don't have it in control right now. They're not looking good at all, and then they lose Malkin. So I'll check how long the injury is, but I'm not quite sure. So anyway, they're another team just like Edmonton that I predicted right at the beginning of the year to be right there at the top of the standings.
He shows
at least a dozen games. Oh no, never mind. Sorry.
He shows data. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to see. I'm not sure more news about it. I'll read up more a little bit. But they're already struggling, and especially with the goals against. Like Edmonton is right there. They're losing by they're winning big and they're losing big actually a lot, Edmonton. But Pittsburgh are looking ugly.
Through the first 15 or so games, Edmonton was the analytics. If you're an analytics guy, they were the number one analytics team for the start of the season, and to have their record kind of go like that is quite interesting, right?
Yeah.
To see
Edmonton is. Let me see here. They're still pretty bad. They've got 74 goals against, so they're right there. They're a minus 15 goal differential, so they're not much better. They're both allowing goals way too much. They both have goaltending issues, kind of, it looks like right now, and defensive issues.
It's a little bit strange to see Talbot sort of struggling the way that he is. It's definitely a little bit odd, I would say, just to see them so much. So let's kind of go back to Edmonton. I think. Do you think that the team is too slow? That's kind of been one of the things that's been sort of kind of bantered about throughout most of the pundits that are out there that sort of say what they think the problem is. Do you think that is maybe an issue? Do you think everyone outside of McDavid is just a little bit too slow?
Yeah, it's possible. I think that I think more than anything, it's that defense. I think it's that defense is not able to get the play going at all. Like they don't have anybody right now. Like I like the way Nurse is playing. In fantasy, he's a pickup. I honestly think he's a great pickup right now if he's available in your league because he gets hits, he gets all those side stats. He's playing on the top line. But he's not the guy you want on your PP at all right now. He's not a PP quarterback, and Larson's obviously not. Klefbom is not playing like it, like really not playing like it. Russell has never been a good PP quarterback. Benning and Oivitu, like that's a very bad defense, honestly. I love Larson as a player. I love Nurse as a player. I like Russell as a player. I like things they do, but I think the good teams in the NHL have 2 power play guys that are snipers, like that can like control the puck, can have very, very comfortable with the puck on their stick, get it to the right guy on the power play. Markov, Letang in Pittsburgh. And they just don't have that, and there's none available. So that's their issue to me.
It does seem like they're a little bit reluctant to go with the 4 forwards and 1 defenseman as well.
I'd like to see Letestu getting more time there because I like him as a player. Like I think he's underutilized by them. I think he's a very underrated defensive player, and he's got some offensive skill too if you put him on the power play.
He is on the power play. He's on the first line power play. He kind of lines up right along the hash marks there. He's kind of that one shot off the left side hash marks is what he is. He's on the first power play line if I'm not mistaken.
What about Kyra? I don't know how to say his name. Jujhar Kyra.
Kara, yeah. What I'm not sure how to pronounce his name correctly either.
Jujhar Kyra. It's a test.
He's had a couple of strong games in a row. He's a big body. To me, I think that he needs to utilize it a bit more. And I think this is one of the things that Edmonton. I'm going to give you what I think is the problem in Edmonton, and this is just my kind of thoughts, and you can just tell me what you think about this. I think, and I sure hope it's not the case, because I think that if that is the case, it's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed quickly. I think that maybe McLennan's lost the room a little bit, and I'm not sure what the reasoning behind it is or what's happened there. But I seen it, and I'm not sure if it was you that I mentioned this to. It was almost a month and a half or 2 months ago when I kind of said the same thing. It looks like he's sort of lost the room because everyone looks disinterested and not interested and not wanting to really put in the effort that it takes to be that kind of team. I mean, and you go down the entire roster of the Oilers and you watch them play. Like Cassian has showed a couple of games now and then that the type of player he was in the playoffs, which was a guy determined to skate and determined to make you pay for every single time you've touched the puck. Lucic has showed very little of that throughout the year. And they came out sort of, out of the gates beating Calgary 3-0, and it had the entire fan base sort of going, and it looked like that was there. But then it just sort of tailed off really quick. So to me, it makes me sort of wonder if maybe that's happened. McLennan is one of those coaches that wants you to put in your work on your days that you're scheduled, not game days even, just on your practice days. And I wonder if maybe something along those lines has sort of caused a rift in that room, which has made the kind of the team sour. I hope that's not, because I like McLennan, and I like the direction that the Oilers have gone with it. There's a lot of people sort of, blaming Chiarelli as well. And I hate that. I really hate that, because to me, he is the first guy in 15 years that looks like he's actually doing something to improve this team.
Yeah.
And it bothers me when people jump straight to Chiarelli. He's made trades that are not easy. And he's doing something. He's building something. And I can't fault him for that. I mean, you look at the price that he paid to get a guy like Adam Larsson, and I still think that trade was a very good hockey trade. It helped both teams out. But that's the price you pay for defensemen, like you mentioned before. It's a really tough situation to be in when you were trying to fill a hole like that. Like when you're trying to fill a hole and you need a defenseman, that's the going rate for them. So like I mentioned this to somebody before, if you think it was expensive to get Adam Larsson, wait till you see what a guy like Oliver Ekman-Larsson goes for. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's 23 years old, 24 years old. He is going to get a king's ransom.
Yeah, he is too, and he's going to be available. He's got to be. You'd think they really do need to make a move there. I don't know. They haven't to this point. Like they needed to do it last year. But I guess
Toronto should be, looking at him. Yeah, but is Toronto willing to give that much up? Are they willing to give up like a Nylander plus a couple of first round picks, like first round picks? That's what it's going to cost. It's going to cost a guy like that. It's going to cost a Marner or a Nylander or something along those lines to get a guy like Ekman-Larsson. They're not just going to give him away, because I'm sure that there are a bunch of teams that are, would be lining up to pay for a 24-year-old defenseman that is basically going to be spending the prime years of his life on the back end of anchoring a defensive core. So,
yeah,
I mean, if I were Edmonton, I'd make, like I would definitely, call and see what the asking price is on him. I'm not sure if they can afford him cap wise, but I mean, man, he's a hell of a player. He's a hell of a player to add to any defensive core.
He's his contract's good through 2019, and he's a 7 million cap hit next year. So that's not that bad, really. And you got a year of him. If you trade for him, you get a year of him for sure. You don't have to worry about free agency. So
If I were the Oilers, I'd be more than willing to send over a salary like Mark Fane, or yeah, like a Mark Fane's salary just to get it off the books.
yeah,
Bring him in, um, give up whatever picks it takes, as far as I'm
what
concerned.
if it cost you Paul Jujarvi?
Well, this is the kind of the thing, right? I know it's going to cost one of those two things. I myself, I don't think it's a good idea because, again, one of our issues is depth at forward as well, right? But I mean, if you could get away with doing something like, look, we'll give you 3 first-round picks and Mark Fane type thing, I'd be more than inclined to do that, because I think that the Oilers' window for winning is sort of now in the next kind of foreseeable 6 or 7 years. So they don't really need these first-round picks anymore because they're going to be late second-round picks anyway. What they need to be doing is they need to be bringing in people that are going to start making this team win and making them into legitimate contenders.
Yeah, I agree. They got to do something. It might be Yamamoto that it costs. I don't know if they would ever give up Paul Jujarvi, but I could.
He's played pretty well the last few games, that's for sure. I mean,
And he's got a really big upside. Like he's not been quite up to snuff so far, but he's young and he had the language barrier the first year, and I think he's got the body and the makeup to be a good player.
They say the same thing about Yamamoto too, though, and that's kind of the thing when you have two players that kind of have that upside. It's really tough to sort of give them away. I mean, and if it goes according to plan, I think that they could be able to sign up Puljujarvi at a nice little bridge deal for a few extra years if it sort of stays on the pace that it's going. And trust me, every team that goes through this that are looking really good now, Toronto's going to have the same thing. They're going to have 1 or 2 years where they've got depth guys and guys that come in, and then it all is going to go downhill from there. And you've seen it with Chicago. You've seen it with Pittsburgh. You've seen it with every team that had to give away big, important pieces of their young core because they just can't afford to pay them all.
Yeah. And teams are getting smarter now too, and they're not trading away those young core. They know that they've realized that like their draft picks have huge value now. Those draft picks are not just, you don't just give away your draft picks anymore. You gotta make a good pick and get them in your lineup within 2 years. Like, absolutely.
You even jump back to a team like Arizona. They could very well go from getting the first overall pick this year to next year being a completely different team, like a lights out sort of a team. I mean, you look at the prospect core, the prospects they have, Dylan Strome, Domi, Reeder, all those guys are so young and so good on that team that they could literally turn it around and be lights out next season with pretty much the same guys aside from Dahlin on defense.
Yeah.
And again, add into the fact that they could end up trading away a guy like Ekman Larson and bring in even more young talent. They could have one of the deepest prospect pools ever assembled in Arizona by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, they've got Keller playing well now. They've got Duclair, who's turning it around right now. He's a fantasy option right now. Yeah. Dvorak seems like a decent player. We'll see about Dvorak, and Max Domi, they're all that core is so young and talented for sure. That's why I thought they'd be better this year. I thought the young guys would age a little bit and I didn't think they were going to be playoffs at all, but I thought they would be more respectable this year, like not a laughing stock.
Going for the first 15 games without a win, I didn't expect that. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. How about so there's a couple teams I noticed that are kind of dropping off. A few of them I think are predictable, and a few of them maybe not. Number one is New Jersey. New Jersey's kind of dropping off in the last 10 games. They're kind of going back to, what we might have expected at the beginning of the year. I think they're 3-6 or something like that. And it kind of looks to me like they're coming back down to earth. They're 3-3-4, to be exact.
They're a tough team because, like I said, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, even it wasn't one or two guys that really turned their fortunes around. It was like bringing in these three kind of younger guys that came out of nowhere. Now, I didn't expect those three guys to keep it up, but at the same time, man, that's even if they stay at 500, that's a pretty big improvement for them as far as I'm concerned.
And I think Nico Hischier, I don't know how to say his name properly. It's undervalued how good he has been too. Like he's been a great first year player. That definitely has a chance for rookie of the year, I would say. And he's stabilized that team down the middle for sure. Like it shows the value of adding a solid center like that in the draft. If you can get a defenseman of a huge value, but if you can get a top level center as well,
Well, you see the thing, right? Like if you kind of go back over the past, even I'd say as far back as 10 years, the two most valuable positions are defense and center by far. And this is where Edmonton sort of made a few mistakes. Instead of taking Seguin, they took Hall, which is your classic center versus winger thing. There's no it's not a mistake. I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? And at the time, you can't really not take the guy who just won back-to-back Memorial Cup MVPs. But I mean, at the same time, you know, that depth at center is so much more valuable than any winger position is.
Yeah, and also, so
on waivers or you know via trade because there's a plethora of them. There's not so many centers and true number one defensemen out there.
There's it's unsung to the teams that go through the NCAA to get their prospects. And New Jersey is one of the teams that really focuses on the NCAA. That's where Butcher comes from. And they're, you know, if you're going to go for the NCAA guys, you're committed to waiting. Like they're going to do their college. So they're going to be 23 or 24 when they come out. But you get a guy like Butcher who you waited on, and he comes out and he can play right away. Like he's absolutely a NHL caliber defenseman right away. And he doesn't need seasoning. He's not like Werenski's not the normal. Guys that are more normal are like Chabot or whoever this year who come in and they can handle it a little bit, but they can't quite handle the grind or whatever. He's 24. He's older than some of the rookies on his team, a lot older than some of the rookies on his team. So he's kind of mature. He can handle it. I remember the age for maturing defensemen when I was young and we would do fantasy. We always targeted guys that were like 27, 28, 29. That's when defensemen got good. Like they were not good until it's changed. It's changed in every sport. If you look at any sport, you look at the NBA, you look at football, it's like 21 now is like the max age of talent, which is insane. But I still think defense is the slowest of all the positions to become elite. Maybe goalie. Goalie's right in there as well, I would say.
Yeah,
Goalies take a long time to mature.
Here as well, I would say.
But I think you just got to wait on some. You can't expect to fix your defense by adding. Even if you draft the number one pick next year and he's Dahlin and he's great, I don't think you can expect him to come in and be even as good as Werenski was. Werenski was a very rare player. So he's gonna. I think down the line he could be a fix, but I don't know if right away you can expect the other guy in Florida, Ekman or Ekblad.
Another one as well.
Ekblad looked like lights out the first year, but then he came back to earth like a rock thudding down last year, and he was awful. He was one of the worst hockey players in the NHL last year, if you just look at stats. So it just shows you, like, when you're that young, 21, 22, there's no guarantee that these guys are totally ready yet. Hennefin is taking a long time to become a really good NHL player. He was drafted number 2 or something like that, but he's still taking his time. I think he's going to be good, but you just got to wait.
Yep. Who else do you got that's sort of fallen off? Philadelphia, for me, has been a team that's sort of fallen off a little bit.
Yeah, that was one I mentioned.
I have to admit that I actually really like the Flyers. I really like that. There's a lot of players on that team that I like. I like Wayne Simmons a lot. I like Giroux. I like Voracek. And they've got a few young defensemen that are pretty decent as well, with Gothelsphere and Sanheim's an up and coming one as well. I still think that with the way Philadelphia came out of the gates, I still think that they can make the playoffs. but it's definitely not going to be easy for them. They're going to have to kind of definitely pick it up from what they've been the last five or so.
And I mean, I have Simmons in fantasy, and he's the second, third, and fourth line are struggling for Philly right now. They're not getting anything done. It's all on that first line, which is a good first line. Voracek's been great, Giroux's been great, Couturier's been great, but that they're not getting any secondary scoring at all.
Up to that first line is a genius move, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I actually watched yesterday. We watched the St. Louis game, but I do want to touch on that too because there's from what I know that there's a lot of fans in Philadelphia that are not very happy with Schen's production in St. Louis.
Ha.
And this is a weird thing for me because I mean they gave Schenn every opportunity to succeed in Philadelphia. Why is it so different in St. Louis? Well, it's different for the simple fact that I mean, if you kind of look like I like Giroux a lot. I think he's one of the over the past 10 years he's been one of the better players in the NHL. He's was always what number 4 in fantasy at the least, right? Um, but when you have a player like Schenn, he has to be put in the right situation. I think that he's playing in a perfect situation for his game in St. Louis right now. He's kind of got two guys that are uh, not similar in the way that they play. Tarasenko is just kind of your razzle dazzle, wicked shot, get him the puck type of guy, and Schenn is kind of the guy that likes to go in and get those pucks and be able to give them to one of those guys. And he never really had that in Philly because I mean, Giroux you could say to a point is like that, but I think Giroux is more of a playmaker. He is sort of that
Yeah.
wicked release type guy. And Voracek's kind of the same thing. He's just sort of a setup winger as well that kind of would prefer to pass first. So I think that he's taken off so well in St. Louis is because he's actually playing with the right style of players.
Well, that was yeah, I read an article today about that was the quiet acquisition of the offseason. That it kind of went under the radar that Braden Shen went from Philly to St. Louis. He was good in Philly. Like he was a 55-point player. He was very minus, had a lot of minus on his record, but a good player. Like everybody would say he's a good player. Definitely hard nose, a big hitter, big body, get him to the net. But I think what also gets under you said it right is that the style of players he's playing with, Tarasenko is a monster, and like he I don't know if he'll ever be a 100-point scorer, but he's that kind of skill. Like he's that when he gets the puck on his stick, he's terrifying for defenders. So he draws attention. He draws just like Ovechkin. He reminds me of Ovechkin. Like you get the puck and you just think he's going to do something nasty every time. Um, and because of that, and he shoots. He's not afraid to shoot. So a guy like Schenn totally benefits from those rebounds. You're right. He grinds in the boards. He keeps the puck alive. He's the perfect guy to fit with those guys. And Schwartz is awesome too. Absolutely awesome. So, and also a setup guy, right kind of guy. I mean, St. Louis is I don't know. I don't know if they're the best organization right now, but they're right in there because they're year after year also competitive. They had a couple down years, I think, when Allen was kind of finding his game, but they're consistently awesome. And they're a team that brings in young guys and they produce right away. You look at their defense, and it's like Parayko is a guy that's just been added at Edmondson. Pietrangelo is a guy they drafted. Shattenkirk was a guy they had. They just constantly cycle in the new young guy who's a stud.
Yeah.
Like right away, a stud.
Edmondson has definitely been a nice addition for them. Again, a just kind of finds that they just sort of stumble upon.
Exactly, and they stumble upon like a way above average defenseman. Like Edmondson is like, who knew about Edmondson before last year? And he's top line and playing great, like steady, solid, eating a ton of minutes. Really good player. Pietrangelo also gets undervalued. He's great. Like he's really good. Why they knew they could get rid of Shattenkirk. They knew they had Parayko. They knew they had Edmondson, and they knew they had Pietrangelo, who's like a leader and solid. So they knew that these young guys would progress well. Anyway.
Peter Angelo's leading the league in points right now, or for defenseman points.
Is he? I didn't even know.
Yeah.
He's been great. I have him as a keeper in the other league, not the one that we're in, and I'm glad I kept him.
Some of the defensemen that haven't scored a goal yet this year. This is a pretty interesting thing because we were talking. I actually seen this on, I believe it was the NHL Network the other day. They had listed the defensemen that surprisingly haven't scored a goal yet. You would be really, really shocked to see who's on that list.
Especially at number one.
Yeah, especially the number one guy. I mean, how many did he score last year?
So yeah, it's Brent Burns we're talking about. Clearly,
This is the guy. Yeah.
He's got 8 points. He's not playing well. He got an assist last night, but he went on a almost 10-game stretch, I think, of no points whatsoever. I mean, if I'm in a fantasy league, I'm trying to get Brent Burns right now. Give me Brent Burns. I'll take him. I'll give you Peter Angelo. Maybe not Peter Angelo. Maybe though. I might even give you Peter Angelo for him.
I would probably do a Peter Angelo for Burns swap.
Yeah, right. So, but that's not lowball. You could go lower than that. You could lowball maybe. You could make a trade where you get Burns and get other pieces as well. But trying to get him right now is a smart move in fantasy. I think he's. I saw a stat today that he's the player in the NHL who's had the most shots and not scored a goal. So that's not going to continue. He's got 80 shots or something and no goals. So
he was the leading. He was one of the leaders in shots against last year. I'm quite sure that was.
Yeah.
The way that.
So I mean, absolutely, that's not going to continue. He's got 84 shots on goal and not a single goal. So, I mean, the most obvious statement in the world is he will turn it around. But the question is why? And I think I was reading another article about Paul Martin, who plays on his normally plays on his pairing, who's been hurt and not been healthy this year. He had off-season foot surgery and is still struggling and not really playing. Hasn't been playing. And Paul Martin is not a amazing defenseman, but he is the rock that holds that pairing down defensively and allows Brent Burns to go do whatever the hell he wants, take shots, skate up the ice.
Either he's definitely not a slouch.
No, he's a bit undervalued because he doesn't score, but he played in Pittsburgh for years and didn't score a lot, but everybody who played with him got better always.
Yeah. So
that's what I look at with defensemen, especially those guys that don't score, but they're another guy is Mark Methot, who used to play with Carlson. Methot, I don't know how to say his name properly. He doesn't score, and he would go the whole year without getting like 5 points playing alongside Carlson. But if you talk to people on Ottawa, they would all say, "Oh, Methot is hugely valuable to our team. We love this guy. He plays so hard. He gives Carlson the freedom to do whatever the hell he wants." And I think having no Martin right now for Brent Burns, and their defense is young. They now have a young defense because Martin's out, and they've got some young guys replacing them who are playing okay, but it's not the same as having a steady guy like Martin. So I think that might be the issue. And I think either way, even if Martin is not back, I still think Brent Burns is a buy low. Absolutely a buy low. And if you could get him, especially in a keeper league where you get to have Brent Burns, the best defenseman maybe in the NHL, for years to come, which is hard to get, try to get him right now if you can.
This is true. Another surprising one I found out was Ryan McDonough as well. Hasn't scored a goal.
Yeah, and he's probably getting a lot of shots as well, I'm sure, because he's getting a lot of minutes.
Right. I mean, he's anchoring that power play, and which is, again, pretty surprising.
How's he doing overall? 12 points, solid plus. He's playing well. He's just not getting goals. He's got only 38 shots compared to the 84 by Burns. So maybe coach needs to tell him get the puck on the net more. might be the advice to McDonough, because I'm surprised that he's only got 38 shots. He's like power play quarterback for them right now.
Yeah.
I guess Shattenkirk has sucked up a lot of that from him, so that's affecting him maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it's sort of played out. It's pretty neat to see the list of guys that actually haven't scored a goal the other day. I read an article about all the defensemen that haven't actually scored yet. I can't really find it at this point to find out who else, but those two jumped off the page right away for me.
Yeah, I think I'd put Burns a game or two away from breaking that for sure. I think it'll happen maybe tomorrow or the next game he plays. So
You never know, right?
the buy low is almost over for him. So buy right now if you can buy him.
This is true.
How about two teams I noticed that are doing better? I'm super interested in. One of them, I think it's kind of expected. Nashville are big time on the rise right now. Looking good again. Looking right back to maybe Stanley Cup contenders the last 10 games. So I'm wondering, do you think they're back to where they should be? The guy I noticed on their team that is performing is Kevin Fiala, young player that they're given more minutes and more high leverage minutes for sure. And he's produced. He's almost a point per game his last 10 games. And that's right when they've started winning. So
I will say this right here: if you want to kind of gauge how valuable a center is in the NHL, look at how Nashville was playing before they went out and they got, what's the guy from Ottawa's name there?
Turris.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle Turris. That's right. Yeah, look at how they were playing before they went out and got Kyle Turris, and look at how they're playing now. It's like night and day. I mean,
yeah, good point.
They since adding that depth down the middle and have Kyle Turris brought in has completely changed the outlook of that team. I mean, they're a lot stronger. And Johansson was struggling a little bit. I just wanted to let you know, I had actually messaged you a couple of days ago because in my one other money league, I had asked you if I should drop Winterberg for Johansson. I went ahead and did that anyway, and it was one of the best things I've done because he sort of turned it around the last little bit here as well.
The Wenberg, I've been asked by another buddy too. That's funny that I didn't even notice that, but I also had another buddy ask me if you should drop him, and it pains me, but you got to drop Wenberg right now. If it's a deep league, don't. If it's a very deep league, he's still got value. But if you're in a shallower league, he's doing nothing, and his injury is the weirdest injury. They're saying full body injury, and they won't say anything else. Sounds like maybe concussions to me or something, and they're trying to sugarcoat it. They're not trying to admit that he's having maybe vertigo or problems like that. Makes me a little worried for sure.
Yeah, it could be. I definitely pulled the trigger on that one, and I dropped him and I picked up Johansson, and it's been a smart move thus far. I've got to say this about one team, and I'm not sure. This team sort of is quietly having an unbelievable year. Columbus Blue Jackets. We had spoke about this on a few podcasts about saying that there's very few goalies out there that you should pay the money to and that can actually win and steal you games. And our consensus was Carey Price and Schneider. I am going to take my hat off and throw Sergei Bobrovsky's name into this list of players. When he is healthy, he is, I think, right now the best goalie in the NHL. Without question at this point in time. I think that there's no goalie that's anywhere near doing what he's doing at this point. And he is making Columbus look extremely dangerous. I like the way that they've kind of quietly went about it, but they are an extremely deep team. They're deep. They've got guys who can score on every line. They can play any sort of game that's kind of thrown at them. I was a little bit skeptical on the Panarin trade when it first happened because I wasn't sure if Panarin could do it without Kane and Taves. But boy, has he proved me wrong as well. He is a really good player, and he has sort of proven to me that he wasn't just about Kane. And that team looks extremely dangerous to me. They could be a team that really – they could be the only team in the Eastern Conference that gives Tampa Bay a real good run for their money.
Yeah, you're right with Bobrovsky too. I was just looking him up, and his numbers the last 2 years are as good as any goalie in the last 2 years, and in any 2 year period. Over 93% save percentage all of last year, and then he's 93.6 this year. So he's even better this year.
He has killed me every single time that a team has him on my team. In the fantasy, they have destroyed me. They have taken every goal stat, and it is 100% everything to do with Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah, he has to put his name in the ring now with guys that are always go early in drafts in fantasy like Price and Holtby. I think absolutely Bobrovsky. If he, I mean, let's see how the rest of the year goes. But if he's anywhere near this good and continues even at a 9.25 save percent, he's legit like Vezina every year, kind of good. So,
like I said, I've watched a few of their games, and boy, oh boy, he's just good. He's just really that. He's just that good, and he's
you
getting.
know what's funny? Tortorella used to coach Vancouver back when they had Luongo, and he would put up Vezina quality totals year after year. And I've heard stuff about his systems that he really focuses on. He allows shots. He's not negating shots, but he focuses on negating where the shots come from. And the goalie being very prepared that, okay, we're going to allow shots sometimes, but you're going to get it from this angle, and it's not going to be screened. And we're going to be very clear about that all the time. So maybe it's a bit of a like Bobrovsky was good before Tortorella. Don't get me wrong, but he's been better the last 2 years with Tortorella. So I'm wondering if Tortorella's system just works exactly perfectly for Bobrovsky's game.
You have to sort of give some credit where credit is due when it comes to Tortorella, because let's be realistic. I think almost every single pundit that was out there, like even the big guys like McKenzie and all those guys, they sort of laughed at Columbus when they brought him in and figured it was only a matter of time before he went off on some sort of tangent and lost the room and had his players turned against him. But he has made this team a real contending team as far as I'm concerned. Like they've been great. I mean, yeah, they lost. If you remember last year in the playoffs, I actually predicted them to beat Pittsburgh because I thought they had enough depth and guys that could get under the Penguins' skin to take that series. Of course, they didn't, as history serves. Penguins turn around, won the cup. But I mean, I think that they are a very much legitimate team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and I look at their roster, and you got like Foligno's struggling this year, but there's your third line center is Foligno.
Every one of the keepers in the league that we're in that I took is struggling.
That's just the way it's going for you, eh?
All 6 of those guys that I took are struggling. Every single one of them. It's been a real tough go for me off the gate. I mean, it's nice that Ho-Sang's finally starting to, get some points, but he was sent down to the minors for a while, right?
Yeah.
It's been a tough that pool. It's been a real rough one. That's why I'm kind of thinking about selling early here.
The other thing I'll say, and I always look at this with any organization, but coach too, is how they infuse the young talent in. And if you look at that Columbus roster, there's a lot of young guys that are playing well. And like Wenberg's not even playing right now, when Wenberg had a great year last year. You got Cam Atkinson, who's part of their system, but that was before Tortorella. But Dubois is a pickup right now. I'll tell you that. I just picked him up in our league earlier, right before the draft, right before the podcast, because he's right up on that second line, and I mean, he's playing well. Bjorkstrand, Sonny Milano's had a decent start to the year, and look at Werenski last year, who is all Tortorella coaching. Yeah. So, and Seth Jones is hit another level.
In the Calder, I'm not sure if he'll be able to pull that off. It's still early yet, though, but I think that he ends up turning into a really good player for them. Especially,
Dubois?
Yeah, I think that especially if they keep him at center, which again is a real tough thing to do, especially if you're moving your captain Nick Foligno, who had such a hell of a year last year, back to the third line. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's really interesting how that's sort of broken down, but I think that team's great. I mean, you look at Bjorkstrand and you look at Wennerberg, you look at Panarin. Panarin's 25 years old. I mean, they're full of guys that can really play that are young, and they're quite stacked on defense as well. If you kind of go through their list and you look, I mean, they've got lots of depth there as well. It's a scary team as well.
Yeah, they are. That depth is kind of crazy, and the youth and the energetic nature that they've got. And he gets them playing that way too. He is the kind of coach that gets guys playing with energy.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So
I
like,
like him. Right?
you haven't even mentioned a guy like Boone Jenner, who's still quite young as well in his career, who could very well turn into something that's really significant for this team. So I see them doing some real damage in the playoffs this year if they get in there injury free. That's for sure.
The only other team I wanted to mention that the other team that I predicted was going to do well this year, but I wasn't totally committed to it. Winnipeg. And they look as legit as could be. And they're playing at a high level. They're third in the NHL right now, I think. Yes, third in the NHL in points. Tied with the three other teams, but they're right there behind St. Louis. And as you and I talked a lot, I think they might have stabilized their goaltending finally after years and years and years of not being able to stabilize it with some pretty terrible goalies. And I think Connor Hellebuck is kind of hitting his stride. And with that roster, man, they're so deep. They got Line A on the second line. They got guys like Wheeler and Shifley at the top who've been doing it forever. Ehlers. Little's not doing anything this year, but it's just a good roster on paper.
Mine too. Little, yeah.
Yeah, another keeper.
Can't even. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, he's been awful. Did you drop him in leagues?
Throughout this year, I've got him on my roster for shit's sake.
I've been tempted to drop him, but I just can't quite do it because I still think he's going to turn it around. He still gets those face-offs.
Right, he's centering Ehlers and Line. How do you not put up some points with those guys, right? I mean,
he's got 3 points in 5 games, so maybe he's getting going a little bit. I don't know.
5 games, 5 points on the year. Oh,
7 points. No, he's got 9 points in the year. 9 points in the year. Awesome. Yeah. He gets you face off. Come on, he gets you face.
Yeah, that's the silver lining, I guess you can call it, hey.
But anyway, I just think the only thing I want to say about them is I think they are legit. Like, I definitely think they are legit. I think adding a guy like Line A in the draft last year he's also like as good as it gets. He's not quite Matthews, it looks like, which was a good draft pick by Toronto. Close.
They had really, that was the consensus, was Matthews. So
yeah, but there was similar talent, but it was more the position that Matthews plays in the impact.
It does look fairly good. I think they do have a few question marks still. I think they would like to probably bring in another depth defenseman if they do. But I mean, they do have 4 quite solid defensemen there. I mean, Byfuglien he's just a beast. I mean, let's be honest. He is I actually had a conversation with a member of our Oilers fan group who said, "Oh, the Oilers should be much better." And I said, "I think our biggest issue is that we don't have a legitimate number 1 defenseman." And I said, in order for us to trade for one, it's going to be extremely expensive. He said, well, there's lots of teams that don't have number 1 defenseman. And he actually mentioned New Jersey and Winnipeg was one. And I kind of laughed. I scoffed at it. I'm like, if you don't think Dustin Byfuglien is a legitimate number 1 defenseman, then you need to research that a little bit better, because he is absolutely 100% a number 1 defenseman in this league.
And he has been for, 6 years? No, wait, more than that. Go back for even further. He had 53 points in 2010.
Yeah.
That's number 1 defenseman, 53 points.
He's beastly. He's a beauty. He's one of my favorite players as well. He's just such a handful to play against, right? But I mean, they've got some decent guys back there. Again, Tyler Myers back there is good. So I mean, they definitely got a little bit of depth back there, but they would like to add 1 more defenseman, I think, for if they're going to be, kind of in that cup conversation.
Tyler Meyer was a really good acquisition by them last year, and that went quiet too. Buffalo just gave him up for pretty much nothing, and Meyer was rookie of the year. Let's not forget, he was rookie of the year in his rookie year. Yeah, look at his stats in his rookie year; it was crazy. Huh. And he's a big body. He's one of those guys like Ekblad who came out strong, and everybody thought he was a superstar, and then he fell off for years. But that's kind of normal for young defensemen, and he's looked to me like he's turning it around and becoming a very valuable defenseman.
Yeah, points in his rookie year, hey?
How many?
48.
48, rookie of the year.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, he was a monster, and everybody thought he was this new sniper giant guy. He's 6'7" or something like that.
He's a big dude.
And then he just fell off. The next 2 years was just nothing. And he played a little bit better in Buffalo last year, but nobody plays well in Buffalo, it seems. But this year, he's fantasy relevant this year, and that's been the first time in a long time. Like he puts up the side stats. He only puts up plus, and he might get you some points every once in a while too. Like he's actually becoming a valuable player in fantasy, which doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean everything, but it says something about him.
It helps.
So
it definitely helps. Because like I said,
definitely helps.
Winnipeg's defense is quite good. I definitely don't see too many weaknesses there. I mean, and they've got some good young guys too. I mean, Kyle Connor and Ehlers and all these guys that you mentioned. And but yeah, geez. Oh, right now they've got Enstrom out, but they've got Morrissey, who's really good. Myers, which is good. Trouba, which is great. Who's the other guy? Kulikov, which is all right. I mean, they're pretty decent. They'd like to have one more depth defenseman, but I mean, yeah, they definitely look pretty solid there. That's for sure.
Pretty solid, and young. And that's the other thing too, is that they're young. Even like Ehlers and Laine are like super young, 21 years old. Morrissey's 22, guys like that. So Byfuglien is getting older, but that should be fine. They can handle a few older guys. I think there's value in those older veterans, especially on defense. So, I mean, they look good to me, and I think they're here to stay. And as you guys, you and I have talked a lot, if you're doing fantasy and you're wondering about Hellebuyck, if he's for real or not for real, I wouldn't base it as much on Hellebuyck. I would look at that team and say that team's for real. And there's no way Steve Mason takes that job from him now. There's no way. No, So the worst case you're getting with a guy like Hellebuyck is you're getting a lot of wins and a decent save percentage. And the best case, because he had huge hype coming out of college, I think it was college for him, is you've got a really high upside goalie. A lot like Matt Murray. They were in the same category of best prospect goalies. So Matt Murray, everybody talks about as the best young goalie and great keeper, whatever. I think Hellebuyck is super high level keeper in fantasy.
Let's put this into perspective just for the people that actually do watch this video that follow any fantasy stuff. We are in a league that is 14 managers and 28 rounds deep. So if you do the math on that, almost 400 players that get out of the NHL. And in our draft, which is, I would say most of the guys are fairly knowledgeable with their stuff. I mean, goalies are at a premium there, and the better ones went early. But Connor Hellebuyck didn't go until the 14th round because last year he was just not very good. And
they also added Mason, so it maybe looked like he didn't even have a full-time job.
So fast forward almost a year to the day, and look at the difference. He could very well turn into the most valuable keeper in a very deep league like that, at being able to be kept in the 13th round.
Say it a little quieter. Don't let too many people know. Those keeper values. I don't want everybody to know them, but yeah, I've looked through the rosters and I've looked through the draft. Hellebuyck right now in that league is the #1 keeper.
I agree. I agree with that as well. I mean, in our league, there's a couple of other interesting ones, but not anywhere near as juicy. I mean, you've got, I think you've got Antti Ranta. Again, he's just in Arizona, and Darling in Carolina.
Yeah, Darling is kind of turning it around right now. We'll see. Carolina is absolutely a team turning it around, but that top line is all of their players are fantasy relevant right now.
Today, though, 6-1 by the Rangers.
Oh, really? I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that's smoked today.
Very interesting to see, because they're a team that I thought was going to make a big turnaround this year, but I don't quite think they're there. The more I looked at it, I don't quite think they're there, and I'm not sold on Darling. I'm not sold on Darling at all like Hellebuyck, that's for sure. Hellebuyck is a tier above.
All right, Tom, anything else you wanted to touch on as far as the standings or play-wise is concerned? I do want to say this. Tampa Bay is insane, and they do not look like they're going to slow down at all.
Yeah, St. Louis is legit. Winnipeg looks legit to me. Columbus looks legit to me. Toronto looks legit to me. Nashville looks legit to me. New Jersey does not look legit to me. Neither does Vegas. Those two teams are going to fall down. Um, and Los Angeles is another one I was going to mention in the dropping because they're 3-6-1 in their last 10. But don't give up on them yet. I don't think they're that bad. Their goal differential is still plus 13, which
I
is right up there with the very top teams.
I will tell you the biggest surprise you haven't touched on yet. That's probably going to do a lot of falling here in the next coming little while. And you're wearing the stinky jersey right then and there.
My boys, what are you talking about? Edler's back. They're good. They're good now.
Back there, good. Said no one ever.
I had to argue with my buddy over Edler's value because I mentioned him in that little waiver wire thing because he's got 4 games this week, and if you want blocks and you want shots and you want hits, he's going to help you there. I didn't think he was going to get points, and he's got 2 assists in 2 games. Oh yeah, I win.
He's good. I also think Colorado's played pretty well too, considering. I think they'll do a little bit of falling back to earth as well, and some teams that are sort of on the rise. I think. I want to touch. I actually would like to talk to you about this one a little bit because this one we actually haven't talked about this team much at all. Tell me what you think thus far. I'm not sure if you've caught much of it, but the Dallas Stars.
Well, I know that Radulov, his addition, I thought was going to be great for them, and it initially didn't go that great. I don't think. But it's turning around now for sure. Like Radulov's been really good for the last little while. Yep. I'm a little worried about their defense, honestly. Like their defense was not fixed at the end of last year. They added Hamhuis, who's not even, I'm not sure, like he's decent veteran, but he's not very usable anymore in the NHL, I don't think. Steven Johns and Oleksiak as their back guys, like their defense is weak. And they addressed some of their issues in the offseason. Like I do like them getting Radulov a lot. I think he fits their team.
They thought as well, didn't they? They have Mathot at this point, don't they?
He's not in their pairings right now. Maybe he's hurt.
He just got injured, I do believe, but I do think that he is in Dallas as well.
And that's a good addition by them.
He's injured. He's injured at this point in time, I do believe. Let's see.
I mean, I look at them on paper. Their forwards are fine. I like Radulov. I prefer Radulov to who'd they get rid of for Radulov?
He's here, yeah. He's on the list here. They've got John, Lindell, Mathot, Oleksiak, and Greg Pateryn on their defense.
So you see the issues there. Like you look at Edmonton's defense and you say there's issues there. Well, you look at Dallas' defense, there's issues there for sure. It's very similar, except Klingberg is clear number 1. Yeah. So you've got a little bit better, I'd say, in Dallas, but maybe not though, because the lower guys are lower than the Edmonton lower guys. Like Esa Lindell is going to be good. He's a good, steady defenseman. He belongs on a top line in the future. But he's pretty young, and I don't know if he's ready for it now. Pateryn is not much value at all. Hamhuis is end of his career, probably retired next year. Oleksiak is okay. He's an old model defenseman. He
came from that big thing too. I mean, he was touted to be the Tyler Myers, Zdeno Chara type guy because he's a monster too. He's a really big dude, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's that old model. That's what I'm saying. He's that big body like Chris Pronger. He's going to be giant. Everybody's going to be afraid of him. That's not the way the NHL is anymore. That's just not the way the NHL is anymore at all. So a guy like that, guys just skate around him and they avoid him. And you got 5'8" guys like Yamamoto or whatever coming into the NHL and producing when they come in. Like Yamamoto, not yet, but Panarin or whoever.
I asked about Dallas because they lost to Colorado today, 3-0, and they're sort of like they're just up and down for me, and it's really tough to see because I think they were touted to be one of the best ones in the Western Conference, and they're not really there at this point in time.
Wow.
It was a bit sort of
around, just like Edmonton. They can score. They're always going to be able to score. Like they forever, as long as they got Seguin and Ben and Radulov and Spezza. Spezza's a good setup guy as well. They're going to score, and Klingberg. They can't underrate Klingberg as a scorer. But but that defense is weak, and that there's no quick fix. We know there's no quick fix.
One more team on the risers as well, Anaheim Ducks. How they've been able to keep whatever, like, I mean, they're 2 games over 500 at this point at 10-8-3, but how they've been able to keep that up with the injuries that they've had is impressive. That is
Yeah.
solid.
Okay, wait.
Yet they've had Getzlaf out most of the year.
Trivia number 2 for you. I got a little trivia. Name their. Don't look at anything. You can't look at anything. Name their first line center.
The Ducks' first line center?
Yep, right now with injuries included.
It's got to be Raquel, I would guess. Is it Raquel plays, or is he playing the wing? He's center left.
He's on the wing.
Huh?
He's on the wing.
He's playing on the wing. Jeez.
Yeah, you're not going to guess this.
I don't even know who it would be.
Derek Grant.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years.
Nope. He's like a career journeyman AHL guy. Always scored in the AHL. Always was a scorer in the AHL. But like, this is out of nowhere, and he's been good this year. I picked him up in the Dynasty League. He's just sitting there, and he's got like almost a point per game. I'm like, I'll take him. But he, you're totally right that them being even 500 right now with the injury toll they've had is on the upswing. That means they're on the upswing, not on the downswing.
Take a look at how they started the year. They actually had Getzlaf at the beginning of the year, but they were down Lindholm and Vatanen for the start of the year. That's basically their 2 top defensemen. Two of the 3 top defensemen on their roster gone. And they're still able to they came out winning games. Then those 2 guys return. They lose Getzlaf. They've lost Patrick Eves for the entire year, who's been gone. Kessler's been gone. That's insane. And when they start getting healthy, watch out. This could be a real tough team to beat as well.
Yeah, they're a team. When I look at their defense, like we just looked at Dallas, which is exactly the opposite of the Anaheim defense. Anaheim's got a nice defense, and like you look at their 3 pairings, they've got Lindholm on 1 pairing, Fowler on the 2nd pairing, and Vatanen on the 3rd pairing. Yeah. So they're just steady, like steady. And Montour has been a good player this year.
Yeah, Montour has been very, very good, and Josh Manson is a real beauty for me. I loved his father as well. His father, Dave, was one of my favorite all-time players. And
can you do the Dave Manson voice?
He was a buddy of mine. He was one of my favorite players back. When he went to Edmonton, I was pretty thrilled to have him there. So, I mean,
I didn't even know that that was his son at all.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, and they're fairly similar. I mean, they play a real rough tumble game, and he's good. Yeah, Brandon Montour is another one that's come out and stepped up really, really well for them as well. Again, yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the Ducks, and I think they'll be probably at the top of that division by the time it's said and done, I think.
Yeah, I like it. Good call. I was going to mention them too, just because you're right with the injuries. It's crazy they've maintained, and they're maintaining totally.
It has been okay considering some of their injuries as well, but they haven't had the magnitude that the Ducks have had. I mean, they lost Charlie Coyle, had Niederreiter out for a little bit, but I mean, nothing compared to the Ducks, and the Ducks have been able to maintain that winning record at least to this point. So yeah, they're going to be a real tough one once they kind of get healthy.
Like the teams that are lower right now that I think are going to go up are Minnesota for sure are going to move up. Anaheim also. I'm not sure about Ottawa and Philadelphia. I'm a little worried about those 2.
All the talk
Ottawa
after the big Duchesne trade was that Ottawa was going to come out guns a-blazing, but that hasn't really been the case yet. So
no, I think that was a bit overrated. Like people forgot that Turris went back. Like Turris is good, man. And you said how good Turris has been, and I mentioned Fiala. Fiala is on the wing with Turris, and Fiala has become a new player because Fiala is now valuable.
Before, if you take a look at Nashville before bringing in that ultra valuable extra center iceman, and look at them now, they're completely different teams. Absolutely.
So I mean,
having that depth is invaluable.
they were almost pressured to do that deal too, because I knew that deal was talked about for a long time. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm surprised Tourist was part of the deal. Really surprised because as Tourist got to become a good player, at Ottawa has been a good team. So I'm a little bit surprised, and I think he gets a little forgotten about in that trade. And you're totally right that you look at the two teams after the trade, and it's pretty clear what team it looks like they're winning the trade right now. Absolutely.
Yep.
So
Big.
I'd be a little worried in Ottawa.
Yeah, there's not too much I need to touch on here anymore. There's no point in talking about Vegas. I mean, they have played pretty well, but I think we pretty much touched on everything I wanted to touch on this far.
Vegas are just a perfect example of why hockey is a fun sport to follow, because like football does it with the salary cap, and so does NHL, but you can really be, any group of guys can go out there and play their heart out and they'll win games. So it just shows NHL has that, like, the heart is a real factor. If you get guys that are trying hard and they want to win, doesn't matter if they're Tarasenko or whoever, like superstar guys, they can do it. And that's what makes NHL fun. That's the fun thing about the NHL, is why it's a great sport to root for.
This is true. All right, let's switch our focus a little bit to some fantasy. Let's do some fantasy risers and some fallers. How about we do a little bit of that, and then we can just end off on that sort of fantasy note. What do you think?
Sure. No problem.
I'll let you start since you've probably got stuff prepared and I don't. I've got a few, but I mean, I'll let you start first. So this is your sort of cup of tea where you're a little bit sort of more in tune than me. So,
number one, I go deep a lot of the time. I'm not looking too much in shallow leagues. So, guys that I was adding this week, I did add Edler, but I mean, that's not really a worldwide ad. This is not the kind of guy you just want to add in any league. I think a more relevant guy is Dubois in Columbus. I think he is interesting right now. He's got moved up a line onto the second line, and he's got that potential, like you mentioned earlier, to be like super rookie kind of guy. And Columbus probably held him back for a reason, but they're probably also letting him loose now for a reason. So I think in the next little bit, you might see some good production from Dubois. And if you're in a keeper and he's just sitting there on the waiver wire and nobody even drafted him or whatever, he's probably got keeper value for next year. He's the kind of guy who's on the upswing for sure. And another one kind of on the opposite swing is Vrana in Washington, who a lot of guys have been dropping. Like he was very droppable for a little period there. He had a good start to the year. He looked like, oh wow, he's playing with Ovechkin, or he's playing on those top couple lines and he's going to do great. And he was. And then he got in the doghouse with the coach a little bit, I think. The coach said, he came out in the media the other day and said he felt like he deserved his spot, and he forgot that he has to earn his spot every day. And he actually got sat 2 days ago. But came out yesterday, got 2 goals, and got an assist the day before, I think. So he's a guy that if you are in a keeper, he's another guy like Dubois who's got really high upside if he can get it going, and he's on a team that has scoring. Washington definitely still has that scoring. So if people dropped him, I think now's a good time to snag him. Or if you held on to him this long, definitely don't drop him right now. I held on to him in both leagues. It was hard because he was struggling, but I knew that there's no other guy. I'm in it for keepers in those leagues. I want keepers. So I knew that there's nobody on that waiver wire that's going to be a keeper potential like him. So I just kept him, but it's turning out all right now. So
I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and with Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think that they put him on that second line because of the injury to Wennerberg, and I think when Wennerberg comes back, he'll get shifted back in.
True, but are we at all sure what's going on with Wenberg? Like,
yeah, that's the tough one. I mean, none of that stuff gets revealed to
right
on the outside. Remember?
I know. So, but when stuff is really hidden that much, like to that extent, like so blatantly, he has a full body injury. Like nobody's ever said that.
Let me ask you about this, because this is a guy that's I would imagine in some of the lighter leagues, the not so deep leagues, that he's been dropped. Carey Price. It's
Wow.
not familiar to him too, right? I mean, because he kind of did the same thing last year, or the year before, where he had that injury, right? And then he just kept saying, "Yeah, it's minor, it's minor, it's minor," and then it turned out being months and months and months without any sort of action. Him getting into any action, right?
Yeah, he holds things back. And I mean, the way he was playing this year, I hope he was hurt. Like, he was maybe the worst goalie in the NHL during his 10 games that he's played. So, or 11 or whatever it is, 11 games. So 877 save percentage for a possible first round pick in a lot of fantasy leagues, maybe first or second round.
He was one for me, and he has killed me this year. As I said, I had Talbot, him, and Rinne, and Rinne's kind of been my only saving grace. So,
and they've done okay with their replacements of him as well. So that's the other side of it, is that they've been playing better without him. So it's hard to, he might just be a dud all year. Like, I'm worried about him, because you're totally right. He will hide injuries and then suddenly, oh, he's gone the rest of the year, kind of thing. And he's got an injury history, big time. So I worry.
There has been talk that he might be back in the next coming weeks here. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I'll throw my hat in the ring with a couple of guys that you should be picking up. And I sang this guy's praises on the last podcast. Yanni Gourde. If he is on your list, if he is anywhere available, grab him. He's probably playing on one of the hottest lines in the NHL right now with Braden Point. And Braden Point has been really good. But he's one that I would probably go and take a waiver on. Yanni Gourde.
Yeah.
Plays situations. He kills penalties. He's on the power play. He's playing on the second line in Tampa Bay, who, as everybody probably knows, Tampa Bay has been smashing everybody. Take over on him if he's there. He is a beauty, and I hope he just turns into something that's keeper worthy. I want another situation like this year where none of my keepers have panned out. Oh,
I got an interesting one that I'm not even sold on myself, but he's been okay since I've added him. In Edmonton, Kagula, who's now getting the first line minutes. And I know, you're shaking your head, and I agree. I think he's an okay at this specific week, but I just want to warn people exactly what you're saying.
He is my least favorite player on the Edmonton Oilers roster. He, to me, is a less talented Jordan Eberle, and I absolutely hated the way Jordan Eberle played. He is soft, he's small, he is completely and utterly, on most nights, useless. How he has convinced the coaching staff and management that he deserves a spot on the roster is boggling to me.
Well, McDavid are buddies.
Fine. He's probably one of the only guys that can actually skate and keep up, but he'd been there before and he did nothing. I'm hoping that he turns it around and he makes me eat my words, but even before he scored the goal that he got today, he'd been pushed off the puck so many times. And with ease, it seems. To me, he's not an effective hockey player. I hope, and I know this sounds really harsh, and maybe any of the Oiler fans that watch this, because I posted it in the group, are going to probably scream at me about it. But I hope they've brought him up to the first line to create trade value, to get rid of him. Hopefully some other GM somewhere in the league sees something of value in there, and they give us something for him. I would literally take almost anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to say, is that I added him this week in the super deep league that nobody is on the waivers at all. And, he gets 4 games this week. He had the potential. He's got that first line right now.
He's already paid. He scored 2 goals in 3 games, or 2 goals in the last 3 games, right? So he's already paid himself off. So
yeah, exactly. I've already got just like I was saying with Edler. Like, I've already got my value from Edler. He's going to get blocks. He's going to get shots. He's going to get. This is categories league that we talk about. So if you're not playing in a categories league, you don't want a guy like Edler. Like, he's not going to do much other than get categories.
I have picked up
Aguila,
Kajula,
Julia.
I don't know, 4 or 5 times already this year, thinking and hoping that he'd do something. And he's, yeah, I don't know. He doesn't do anything fantasy wise for me. I mean, yes, you've been very lucky where he's performed for you, but
Right when I got him, yeah.
probably had him about 3 or 4 times throughout this year,
Yeah.
and zero for me. Um,
I got one other good one here. This is an actual good one. I think Anthony Duclair in Arizona, who was, if you look at him last year, he was horrible. He went from 2015-16 getting 44 points, plus 12,
yeah, I
good
remember.
shooting percentage, to last year 15 points in 58 games. Absolute hot garbage. Like one of the worst guys. If you drafted him thinking you had, or a lot of people probably kept him because he was probably for free and you could keep him, and you were like, oh, I got this great 44-point player, and then he got 15 points, was droppable. This year, he took a while. He's had injury stuff going on as well. But in the recent weeks, he's been back to his old self when he's playing. So keep an eye on him if he's available in a deeper league. But even in a more shallow league, keep an eye because he's right back to what he was doing in 15-16. And if you get a 45 points out of him, that's good. That's great. That's good as a last kind of player on your roster. So I see him coming right back to getting about that kind of point output. So
I am going to give everybody a little bit of a low risk, high reward guy at this point in time. And right now, he's actually listed on the injured reserve. But I think this was the reason why the LA Kings traded away Michael Camilleri to the Edmonton Oilers for Jussi Jokinen. If you were in a really deep league and you're looking for someone that could very well be an extremely valuable player, grab Marian Gaborik. I think that he came back last week. They said he's been skating with the team, and I think that the LA Kings were extremely impressed with his skating, how fast he is, and how good he looked in the early stages of his practices, and that's why they made Michael Camilleri expendable. And I think that he could very well be inputted on one of the top two lines and score a lot of goals for the LA Kings.
I think he's interesting, but he's been tantalizing for 3 years now. So all these moments come up where you're totally right. He looks good in practice and he looks great. And then he gets on the ice and either gets hurt or just doesn't do anything. And you're like, he used to be so good. Like he used to be so good. And he fell off like almost no other player I've ever seen fall off.
Well, Kyle Oposo, he's got Kyle Oposo-itis.
Oposo might be turning it around. I'm going to say it again this podcast. Maybe he's turning it around now. I haven't dropped him yet.
It was really funny because I remember at the beginning of the year, I mentioned him too, and we were both on the same page. We thought, yeah, he's going to have a hell of a year. He's going to be one of those guys that you sneak in the later rounds, and he's going to have a good year. And I honestly thought the same thing you did. I was on the same page that way. I'm like, yep, that's what's going to happen. I remember I picked him up in my one cash league. He was the dead last round, and I thought, oh, he's going to be the pick of the draft. And yeah, he's been pretty brutal.
Yeah, he's been totally brutal. And like I am sitting on him too. I just can't lose him. I can't drop him. I guess I can, but
Gaborik at this point in time is 2% owned in fantasy league. Okay, and he's scheduled to make his debut this week. So this is sort of me reading between the lines. I think that the LA Kings have had him in practice, and he's been much, much better and faster than they expected. Him coming back from this injury, and that's why they made Michael Camilleri expendable. I think
and he's also not coming back to the same LA Kings team that he played for the last 2 years. Like they're a better team this year.
I mean, it's going to be a lot more offensively minded for him. He's going to be given a little more free reign to go as well. So he's a guy that I would put on my watch list, and I would like. I picked him up. I picked him up and I threw him on my IR spot because I had an extra one available, but he could very well turn into be a really smart add in some deeper leagues that could give you some really good boost in scoring.
One guy I was going to mention because he's all over the news, which happens about once a year with him, is Radko Gudas, who if you're in a categories league, you know what Gudas can be when he plays. And I'm sure a lot of people are questioning, should I drop him now? He's suspended for 10 games. Do I get rid of him? Yeah, you drop him. That's it. No more Gudas. Because he wasn't even good this year,
Well,
really.
he's one of those guys that if you're in a deep category league and you've got hits and blocks, he's one of those guys he's beauty to have. Same with Adam Larson. Adam Larson's been struggling this year, but he's leading the league in hits. He's up there in blocks. He kind of gets those secondary categories for you. But Gudas has sort of just fallen right off. I mean, and the stupidity that he's sort of shown in that that series of events there to get suspended is, yeah, definitely drop worthy for me as well. I
I
mean,
mean, he's not a good guy. That's clear.
don't want
Not a good.
to hold on to a guy like that for the next 2 weeks when you can have somebody that probably fills those shoes anyway.
And I'm sure a lot of people are questioning it right now too, because they've like you can't put suspension guys on IR, so you have to make a decision. You have to either eat it or, and he's just not worth it. He's absolutely not worth keeping
There's
on your roster.
there's other guys out there that you could get to fill that shoes. I mean, Borowetsky, who's injured right now, but he's one of the guys. Chris Russell in Edmonton's another. I mean, Adam Larson in most leagues is not taken.
In Philly, Robert Hagg.
Robert
Keep an eye on.
Well is quite high up there as well. I can't remember. There was a couple other guys. Zaitsev in Toronto.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's great this year.
he has been, yeah. That's been another thing for Toronto too. They've been pretty lucky having him come in. They've had a few really lucky guys come in. I mean, Connor Brown and Zaitsev and a
Yeah.
few others have come in and played extremely well for them too. And that's one thing that sort of hinders Edmonton, and it's really sort of odd. We just don't have any of those guys that sort of come out of nowhere.
That was my point kind of at the beginning was the defense is clearly an issue. There's a lot of issues, but all those guys they rotate in don't really do much. Like the guys like their AHL guys don't come up and do anything, you know? Like was okay last year.
They have a few guys that are quite high up on the radar. I mean, they've got this guy named Ethan Bear, who's supposed to be a really good offensive defenseman. But they just haven't really given him much of a chance. I mean, but they've brought in certain players and then just sort of let them go. I mean, Petrie comes to mind, and Moranson, and these kind of guys as well. So it's a bit odd to see that they haven't had somebody at least be able to come in and sort of step that stuff up. So it's a bit odd for me.
I've got just for interest's sake, there's a couple goalies that are getting added a lot in leagues. Just want you're a goalie, you know those goalies. Max Legacy in Vegas.
Drop him and grab Malcolm Subban. Malcolm Subban should be back this week, and he'll be taking over the starting role.
Good call. I pretty much completely agree with that. Legacy's nothing. Like he's doing well, but he's nothing, and he's not putting up great stats, honestly. So
I'll say this: if Malcolm Subban keeps playing the way he did before he went out with injury, I would almost guarantee that the Vegas Knights would trade Fleury away.
yeah, which they should do. I'm sure that was kind of their plan long term, honestly.
And that is the only reason in our deep league that I haven't dropped Subban. He could very well turn into a beautiful 28th round keeper for me.
Yeah. You still have him in it. You didn't drop him.
I just couldn't do it. I thought about it a few times. So at this moment in time, I actually have one injured reserve guy that I'm just sitting on the bench. It's Ryan Miller.
Yeah, and he's all right to have on your bench too. I've got him on an IR spot on my team too, because when he plays, he's good. When he plays, he's great.
I still think that he could be a starter for at least one more year. Ryan Miller, I think he could still do it. Maybe two. Like, I mean, he was one of the better goalies in the world, 2 years ago. I think that he could still be a starter on some teams out there. I definitely think. So let me get your thoughts on Burakovsky. Drop or hold on to in that IR spot?
Let me see.
He's been brutal.
Yeah, it's been brutal. I know that. That whole team's been brutal. That's another team we didn't even mention. That I mean, off, but they're right down there. And
It's not too
Not a
shocking.
lot.
I mean, they lost a lot of their depth guys. Let's be honest there. I mean, they lost a lot of depth over the last couple of years, and it's a shame. To be if I can be very honest, I would love to see Ovechkin win a Stanley Cup. I think he's one of the more. I think he's the funnest player to actually watch and follow in the NHL, and it's just a shame they haven't been able to build something around him that's cup worthy. It's a shame.
I think you get rid of him, honestly. I don't think he's got enough upside to be worth sitting on. How much longer is he out?
Yeah. Who? Burakovsky? I don't know. He's out for a while yet, but I mean, geez,
I
he's on.
don't think he's got that much value, honestly. He'll probably sit there. Nobody will probably pick him up. So you can sit and wait and probably get him right before he comes back up if you keep track of it.
There's a few guys that I'm definitely keeping my eye on, but at this point in time, I've got one bench spot that's sort of been taken up by IR, but again, Subban has been activated, so he could get. I thought he was going to start the last game in Anaheim, but I do believe that he'll be. They said that he'll be in goal for Sunday, supposedly.
You happened upon Washington. That is another one of my number one pickups this week. It would be Orlov, who got dropped by everyone. He was drafted most places because he was pretty good last year. And he's been real bad to start this year, like real bad, like no points at all. But he's starting to get it going, and he's not really bad. He's just had a rough start to the year. And if he was dropped, he's like 25% owned, I think, in most leagues. So very much could be available in your league, worth checking. And I think this point of the year going forward, I think he's got value. For sure, I think he's got value.
All right, I'm going to add one more guy to this list because I mean, I'm sure that he's owned in most now, but he's a little bit higher than what we usually talk about, but he's 63% owned. And I think he has been an absolute beauty, and it pains me to say this. It makes me feel a little bit dirty, but Matthew Tkachuk is a beauty. He really is. He is the next Jamie Benn. He really is. He does it all. He will completely fill a stat card for you. He does it all. He gets penalties. He's putting up points. He's getting goals. He's playing on the power play. He has been probably Calgary's best player all year.
You know what he is? He's Keith Tkachuk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Keith Tkachuk was a fantasy stalwart year after year, especially if you had penalty minutes. If you had penalty minutes in your league, you needed Keith Tkachuk. Keith Tkachuk was a target every year because of that.
Yeah, he's definitely come from the same cloth as his father, and he has been a beauty. And it pains me to say that Calgary's my biggest rival, but yeah, he is a beauty.
That's a team that has drafted really well year after year after year here. They've got a good run right now of guys that they've drafted being good. Like real good right away. Gaudreau, guys like that who like.
I'm not a big fan of Gaudreau myself, but that's just the type of hockey player that I'm not a big fan of. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from. They got a nice mix of guys in Calgary. They've sort of done it the right way.
Yeah, and Ferland has been valuable this week. Ferland's another guy that's like late round guy for them, late first round guy for them. But he's been great.
I'm going to throw this guy's name in the hat because he's been on the IR, but he's been lighting it up ever since he came back. He is now at a 55% owned on the league. Nino Niederreiter. If you haven't got him, pick him up. Since he's been back, he's played extremely well. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists since coming back in the last 3 games. He's played really, really well. So if he's available, grab him. Worth it.
And he's also, if you got multi-categories, he gets hits. He's a good overall hockey player too. He does a lot of different stuff. So, I mean, there's some obvious guys. Teravainen's the most added guy in like non-deep leagues. Teravainen's an absolute get. If you can get Teravainen, you get Teravainen. Teravainen's good. And he's always been good. When he was in Chicago, they knew he was going to be good. And now he's in Carolina with Aho. And Aho's very good. So they're going to be 60-point kind of guys, maybe 55-point. If he's somehow available in your league, you absolutely need him. I like Matthew Perreault with Winnipeg. while he's not hurt. He's playing right now, so now's when you get him. As soon as he gets hurt, you don't even stash him on your IR. Just dump him. Nobody's going to probably pick him up. But while he plays, he's just good. He's been like that for 3 years. He just plays 30 games a year or 45 games a year or something like that. But get him while you can. And, that's about it. I actually, Myers, I had on the list as a guy to watch because with the way Winnipeg's playing, and if you play in a categories league, Myers could start scoring. I could almost see him going from this non-scorer he's been for a while to turning into a scorer. And he's got the full game. He's got blocks. He's got hits. And he's playing good minutes. So I like Myers as a player. And he had that 48-point year in his rookie year. So it's not impossible that he becomes a real scorer again at some point. So keep an eye on him.
That could definitely be true. He was touted as sort of one of those scorers, that's for sure. How do you spell Teravainen?
T-E-R-A-V.
He's already gone, so.
He's not going to be available most leagues. I think he's about 50% or something like that.
He is right now at he's plus 33 in the last day though, 59% owned.
Yeah, he's good. I don't know, like Carolina had a rough start to the year, so buying in on Carolina players makes sense. Justin Falk might be a guy, their defenseman.
Well, I'll tell you who's been extremely disappointing from them has been Victor Rask. I thought that he would be a lot better this year than what he is.
Yeah, and he's just been kind of jumped over by some of these young players, I think.
He's just a terrible player. He's not doing anything. He's not doing anything. I picked him up I was hoping that he would actually be one of those guys that they played pretty well last year. So I figured that he'd be one of those guys that you'd be able to scoop up and he'd probably get you a lot of points. But he is doing nothing. It's been terrible.
I mentioned Fiala earlier, Kevin Fiala in Nashville. I'm not sure his ownership is like 25% maybe. My computer died on me. But I think he doesn't get a lot of minutes. He gets 12 to 15 minutes at most. But you mentioned Turris, and Turris is well known to be a great setup guy who just makes guys around him score better.
Yep.
And Fiala is super talented and has kind of not quite reached his talent. He's as fast as they come in the NHL, very skilled. This might be a turnaround point for Fiala where he becomes legit like 60-point guy because he's got absolutely that potential. And I like Fiala long-term big time.
Yeah,
he's right there with Teravainen for me, actually. I don't think he's much worse than Teravainen. For skill level, he doesn't get the minutes that Teravainen gets, but he's equally as good of a player.
That's awesome. All right, anything else you want to touch on today, or are we?
I think only last thing that you and I mentioned before the podcast, simple trade etiquette, because we've had some examples in the last couple of days of offers we've been given, or you've been given specifically maybe, that are a little bit poor etiquette.
I will definitely, I have something to say about this for sure. I'll let you introduce it first. You go ahead.
So the idea is you want to make a trade with a guy, and how do you start it off? Like, what do you offer to start the ball rolling, to get the guy to be like, you don't want to give him the perfect trade right away. Maybe. I understand that. You might want to set it up so you might win a little bit, like you get a little more than you might deserve. But a lot of people, and I've had this happen to me in multi-sport leagues, that they will offer you something with a few of the players they clearly want for nothing from them, and expect that to be the way to start off trade negotiations. Like, oh, and you get the message from them, like, you get angry with that maybe. I generally send a message back to them like, hey, man, like, what, do you think I'm stupid? Like, pretty much my normal response. And they'll say, oh, it's just a starting off point, man. I'm just letting you know. I'm just, just seeing what you thought. And generally my response to that is no interest. Talk to you later, buddy. Never going to talk to you again.
Yeah, I sort of get into this situation too because I'm a pretty active general manager when it comes to my leagues, and I like to make trades, and I like to make my trades early. And if I target somebody, and I send you a deal that's really good, and then you decline it, and then send me something back that's ridiculous, to me it just makes me not even want to do that. And I've had this happen on 2 separate occasions here this year. And it, yeah, you're right. It definitely does get frustrating because I mean, our league that we're in is a very deep one, and keepers are very valuable. And when you're out of it, the strategy for you is to try and either get picks or keepers in return for your higher end players that are going for it, right? But the last thing you want is someone who is also trying to do the same thing, but's asking you for a trade, but asking you to help him overtake you in those sort of standings. To me, it just doesn't make sense. So you definitely want to start off trades the right way, and you also have to make sure you're not overvaluing your guys. I mean, yes, you're right. Most leagues have a different value set on those things, but don't overvalue that. I mean, for example, I targeted Vasilevsky, who would be next year a sixth round or a fifth round keeper in our league, who is very valuable at that spot because our league is 14 managers and it's the goalies go pretty fast. So if you can open up one of your first 3 or 4 round picks on players instead of having to worry about goalies in those rounds, it makes a big difference at times. And I had actually I'll tell you the exact trade that I offered. I offered William Nylander, who would be a 17th round keeper next season, and Corey Crawford for Vasilevsky. That was my offer, and he turned and he declined it. And I will also say this: I was actually very happy that he declined it for the simple fact that I thought at the time it was a great deal. I'm not a huge fan. I don't like the Leafs, as everybody probably already knows, so I don't want to have to keep a Leaf. So I was willing to sacrifice that to get that guy. But when he canceled, and I actually took a second to look at it, that was a huge overpayment for that high of a pick. Even. I'm giving up Crawford, who's probably going to put up very similar numbers to Vasilevsky. I think anyway. I mean, Chicago's no slouch when it comes to the team. But I was also giving up a keeper in the 17th round who could very well turn out to be an extremely good keeper in round 17. I was at the time when I sent it, I was very much okay giving that up. Now, I don't expect anybody to just jump on a trade, but when you see good value come through, at least take your time to assess it, not just send something ridiculous in return. It was then counter proposed to me, Nylander Crawford, my 4th round pick for his 8th round pick. Now, when that return trade proposal came back, I found it completely ridiculous because I was giving him very good value off the start for a guy that, yeah, is valuable, not as valuable as those two players combined is. So to kind of turn it around and make it that you want that much more turned me right off it, and I just walked away.
And that's my whole point is it's okay to try to win in trades. Everybody's going to do that. That's the natural inclination of anybody when they do anything. You never want to lose anything, right? We're all competitive. You want that feeling of like, oh, I won that trade. But there's a difference to winning a trade and offering something that the guy would really have to be stupid. Like you're basically saying, are you maybe stupid? Will you take this trade? And it's not a matter of opinion. It is and it's not. The argument is always, oh, it's fantasy. Anything can happen. How can you don't know. You don't know. How do you know? What's the difference between your knowledge and my knowledge? Well, I know enough for what has happened before, and it's reasonably predictable. And I know value. You can definitely gauge value, especially in keepers and stuff like that. Like you giving a 4th round pick for an 8th round pick completely takes away the value you would get for Vasilevsky.
Well, that's kind of what I mean. It kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because I mean, the reason why I was trading for Vasilevsky was to open up those picks beforehand. Me trading one just puts me right back to where I was anyway. I could just take Vasilevsky or an equal or better goalie in those rounds in beforehand. So it doesn't really make much sense for me to do that. So like I said, when you're trading in fantasy, it is definitely a tough. It's a slippery slope, that's for sure. I mean, we recently just vetoed 1-1 too. That was Corey Perry and Justin Abdelkader for Sidney Crosby, right? And you know how that one turned out as well. And I understand that sometimes people value players differently and so on and so forth, but at least from my experience, try to go in with a little bit of realism when it comes to trying to make a trade. If you want something like genuinely you want it to work, then work from a place that's going to be fairly even. Don't be throwing in donkey trades where you're just fleecing somebody else. It's never going to work. And if anything, it's just going to turn people off from wanting to make deals with you.
And the other thing to be really careful is it turns off one owner for sure. It has a potential to turn you off, but every league has a message board. Every single league we play in has a message board. And if you get a ridiculous offer, it's so common now. I see all my message boards get posted with guys being like, "Hey man, I just want everybody to see this. This is the offer this guy offered me. This is ridiculous." Like, and if that message gets out there that you're offering these ridiculous trades, you can get trade shunned real quick, where nobody wants to deal with you. People like get a negative opinion of you. The league that I became a massive trader in one league, that Dynasty League, when I first joined it, because I took over a roster that was really poor, and I had to just fix it. And I made a mistake right away. I was not really aware of Dynasty and how like the young players, how much more they matter. And I traded away a young player for like Matt Sundin. This is way back, right away. Now that looks bad on paper because I made a bad trade real quick, but what it got was a lot of owners offering me a lot of trades over and over because they were like, "Ooh, you'll make some easy trades." And by the end of that year, I had made 50 trades. Like, it was crazy. I was known as Trader Shane. The roster I took over, which was 45 players, I had 44 new players. So, I'm not saying make bad trades, but making even trades or trades that are like very fair for both sides convinces other teams who want to trade with you. And that is only good for you because you're going to need specific stats.
That's something that's invaluable because if you start getting people that don't want to deal with you, that's one less person that you can actually try to improve your team with. So you definitely don't want to be, be doing stuff like that when it comes to leagues like that. I mean, it's a little bit different if you're in one with a bunch of your friends and buddies and such. But when it's with a bunch of guys that maybe you don't know so well, especially, you definitely don't want to be doing stuff like that because, yeah, like you said, if it gets out there, people will definitely not want to be doing anything with you, and that can be more detrimental to your building than pretty much anything else.
So that's the only, like, my main message there is you mentioned that, and there was actually a football trade I saw recently in my other league that I'm in, a football league. They're just like these bananas trades that become these big arguments in the groups as well, because they get vetoed. A lot of people are anti-veto completely, but I'm not anti-veto because I've been in that Dynasty League and seen examples where vetoing has kind of saved the league. There was very much potential for the league to die if a team got any stronger by ripping people off.
There's good sides and bad sides to it because I mean I remember I think you were in the pool at the time and we had one guy who was in there and he basically pulled me aside and he said you shouldn't have league votes because if a guy's going to be a donkey and make a stupid trade, that trade should go through. But it hurts the integrity of the whole league because then how do you determine what is like a legit donkey trade or collusion?
Yeah,
I mean, they kind of there's a really fine line between collusion and a donkey trade. I understand what donkey trades are. I understand what collusion is. But man, some of those can be really tough to decipher. And he actually just said, well, as the manager of that league, you should be the one that has the final say. Well, I says, well, that puts me in a disadvantage to every other owner. Because if I decline a trade in that situation, it's my decision on what I deem as fair or unfair.
Yeah.
And that's a really tricky situation because that, again, can put you in a real detrimental spot when it comes to making trades with anybody else. So I think league veto is the way to go. The only problem that with league veto is that you have to have managers that are paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because in the last one that we're in as well with that situation, none of those guys were really paying attention.
No, and then it becomes like the same thing happened to my football league that just happened. I was super annoyed by a trade that went down that kind of looked like collusion and was a horrible trade. And I kind of spoke out about it and then nobody responded. And then I really spoke out about it. I was like, what's wrong, you guys? Like, how do you not see that this is a horrible trade? And then finally, a couple people rolled in with like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And I'm like, no, yeah, I'm right. Why didn't we veto this? Like, why is this allowed? These guys are buddies. Like, this trade looks bad. And it's the end of the year, and these guys are out, and they're just giving away their good players. Like, shouldn't be okay.
That's what I mean. But there's it's a tough situation. Um, I mean, I think league veto is something that has to be there, but you also have to have a bunch of guys that are legitimately looking at you know, the betterment of the league itself, and that's really tough to find. That's one of the tricky things about fantasy, right? I mean, um, you just never know. So, but yeah, I definitely think that a veto setup is something that is a must because you definitely don't want to have one guy sort of being the overseer. Because if you're the guy you're in first, and you got a guy in second who's making that sort of a trade,
You're gonna try and veto it, maybe. Like, that's not the way you should do it, but that
yeah.
could happen.
But it's
I'll say that the dynasty league that I'm in, the commish has been the commish of he at one time we had three different dynasty leagues going on, and he was the commish of all three leagues, and he didn't even play. He had no team. He was just an outside commish, which was
probably the way.
he he's the best commish I've ever. We butted heads in the past for sure. I used to make waiver wire ads. He used to do manual waiver wire ads where you'd email him, and that's how you do waivers. And I would send him lists of 20 players every single week, and he'd be like, "Dude, like, come on, I have a life. Like, you're crazy. You follow hockey way too closely." And I'm like, "I just want to win, man. Just want to win." So he would get annoyed with me, but what we do is we have vetoes in that league where like we'll vote, but then it all rests on his shoulders. It's completely we veto, and then he looks at it, and he looks at the comments. He has a very solid system in that league that if you make a trade, and I swear by this, if you have active owners, that you make any trade, you have to in a post somewhere in the league page or wherever say how does it help your team, and you have to say a reasonable reason why it helps your team. And if you can't give a reasonable reason why it helps your team, then you're not. Then he will automatically veto any trade where the owners don't post a reason why they did the trade. So it forces people to like say like I think it helps my defense by adding this strong defenseman. Simple things if it's a good trade, but if it's a rip-off trade and it really is clearly a rip-off trade, it makes it really hard to convince people like, oh yeah, that really helps my team. So
I remember in the league that sort of went awry. I had a setup like that too, where I wanted at least 50% of the owners to weigh in one way or another. And if I didn't get 50% of the owners to weigh in one way or another, that no trades would go through. Because at least if you're getting 50% of the owners to weigh in on one point or the other, you can lean with whatever way gets the most votes.
yeah,
So
it's just so hard to get people that are that interested though. That one league works because we're all crazy. We're all these 30 dudes who are crazy and following WHL stats and like all the minor stats, looking at the guys who are getting drafted into the WHL, like so we're crazy guys who do this for no money. There's no money on that league. It's just we love it. We love following deep fantasy hockey. And it works there. There is actually one owner in that league who every year tries to pull off a rip-off trade that he gives away his really good players. We all think he just wants to quit and he just won't say it. And he keeps like offering. Last year was like he has McDavid and he's just trying to give away McDavid for like a first rounder and nothing. And we're like, you can't do it. You can quit, but you can't do that. We're not going to let you do that. So there is a couple owners, but almost all 30 are like these super committed guys. And if you can ever find that, if you ever get a league that's like that, a keeper league, keep it going. Keep it going as long as you can because it's rare to find people that are that committed year by year by year.
I in ours I'm pretty sure that one. It's giving me gray hair.
Yeah. No, there's problems every year. We got a few guys that we struggle with every every once in a while. Everybody knows that stuff, though.
I think that the setup that we have in this league is the best. The fairest way that you can set it up. I think it's great.
Yeah. I like these. I'm in that keeper and I'm in the other keeper that's also from Taiwan people. That one's good as well. That one's nobody does trades in that one. That's the one thing that's a little bit negative about it. Like nobody makes moves. You kind of have your roster and you have your waiver wire guys, but nobody talks and makes trades. Our league's much more active for sure, but they're both fun.
Yep. All right. Well, that should be. I think that should be a good note to end on right there.
Yeah.
Don't be a douche when you're offering trades. Okay.
Yeah, and
Leave the douche.
I have Dubois and you don't have Dubois. That's the other thing. You're probably gonna suck this week, but I've been on fire with the guys I've been saying. So
Okay, I'm 10-5 this week. I'm good.
yeah, I'm good too, man. I've been good for like 3 weeks here. I'm beating league champions.
I'll say this: I haven't won the scoring section of this fantasy in this one since the beginning of the year. I've lost the scoring.
And I somehow am with that ragtag roster. Like that's what I keep winning is scoring. I keep putting up scoring totals, which I'm like.
I mean, my goaltending's been great, but yeah, my scoring's been brutal.
We're getting too specific here. We're jinxing ourselves as well. So.
All right, so thanks everybody for watching and listening, and if you do get a chance to comment on these videos, we do appreciate it. Anything that you'd like us to add, less of Shane bragging about Dubois, any of that sort of stuff would be great. Just to send us a
Edler. For my hometown boys, Edler.
Go hard on Edler. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll catch you very soon.
Peace out.